The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal towers of Zenith Prime Academy. This was not just any school. It was the most famous learning place in the entire galaxy. Students from hundreds of different worlds came here to study together. The academy had tall buildings made of special glass that could change colors. Gardens floated in the air between the towers, filled with plants from 1,000 different planets. Jake Morrison walked slowly through the main hallway. He was 8 years old and very small compared to most other students. His brown hair was messy from sleep and his blue eyes looked around nervously. Other students passed by him without paying much attention. Some were twice his height. Others had skin that glowed like stars. A few could float above the ground without touching it. Jake was one of only 3 human children in the entire academy. Most aliens still thought humans were not very smart or advanced. Earth had only learned how to travel between stars 50 years ago. Other worlds had been doing it for thousands of years. To them, humans were like babies who had just learned to walk. The young boy's father was Captain Ryan Morrison. He worked as a human ambassador, trying to make friends between Earth and the Galactic Federation. Ryan wanted other worlds to respect humans. He hoped that sending Jake to this school would help show that human children could learn just as well as alien ones. But Jake did not feel very smart or special. In his morning class, he sat next to Zara, a girl from Altair. Her skin was made of blue crystals that sparkled when she was happy. She could solve math problems by making the crystals glow in different patterns. On his other side sat Marcus, a boy from Vega. Marcus had purple skin and could move things with his mind. He never had to pick up his pencil because it floated by itself. Behind Jake sat 3 Zorkan students. They looked like walking rocks with thick armor covering their bodies. They were strong enough to bend metal with their bare hands. Even as children, they could lift desks over their heads without trying hard. Jake felt very ordinary next to all of them. He could not glow, float things, or bend metal. He was just a regular human boy who got tired when he ran and had to use his hands to pick up his books. Their teacher was Professor Keltar. She came from a world where millions of bug-like creatures shared one big mind. She had 6 arms, compound eyes like a fly, and could think about many different things at the same time. Today she was teaching them about dangerous animals from across the galaxy. Today we will learn about the most feared creatures in known space, Professor Keltar said. Her voice buzzed like a swarm of bees. Pictures appeared in the air above her desk, showing scary monsters from different worlds. She showed them acid-spitting worms from the poison planet Xerion. Then came pictures of shadow cats that could become invisible. Next were the crystal bears of Altair Prime, with claws that could cut through spaceship hulls. But there is one creature that frightens even the bravest warriors, the professor said. The room became quiet. A new picture appeared, showing something that made several students gasp. The apex stalker stood 12 feet tall in the image. Its body was covered in dark scales that seemed to shift and move. It had 6 bright yellow eyes and claws longer than Jake's whole arm. Its mouth was full of teeth like broken glass. The apex stalker comes from Kethmore, a death world where only the strongest survive, Professor Keltar explained. These creatures can hunt anything. They are faster than racing ships. They can become invisible like ghosts. They can read minds to know where their prey will run. They have never been tamed or controlled. Zara's crystal skin turned pale blue with fear. Marcus dropped his floating pencil. Even the tough Zorkan students looked worried. How smart are they? Asked Lisa, a human girl from Jake's homeworld. Very smart. Smarter than most people. They can solve puzzles, open doors, and plan attacks. They hunt alone and trust no one. In the past 100 years, only 12 apex stalkers have been captured alive. 3 of them are kept here at the academy for study. Jake raised his hand. Where do you keep them? In the bio-containment lab far below us. They are held in special cages that can hold a small star. Many guards watch them every day. Do not worry. They cannot escape. The class continued, but Jake kept thinking about the apex stalkers. Something about them seemed familiar, but he could not figure out what. He had seen that look in their eyes before, but where? During lunch, Jake sat alone as usual. The other human children, Lisa and Tony, had made friends with alien students who thought humans were interesting. But Jake was too shy to talk to the big, strange-looking aliens. They seemed so much better than him at everything. He watched Marcus make his food float around his plate in pretty patterns. Zara was showing off by making her skin flash different colors like a rainbow. The Zorkan students were arm wrestling, their stone-like arms making loud crashes when they hit the table. Jake just ate his sandwich quietly. It was peanut butter and jelly, a food from Earth that no other student understood. They all thought it was very weird to eat something so simple. After lunch, Jake went to his favorite place in the academy. It was a small garden on the 15th floor where earth plants grew. There were roses, sunflowers, and a small oak tree. He liked to sit under the tree and read books about animals from home. Today, he was reading about wolves. The book showed pictures of how wolves lived in groups called packs. It explained how they hunted together and how they communicated with howls and body language. Jake had always loved animals. His father said he had a special way with them, but Jake did not think he was special at all. As the day ended, Jake walked back to his room. Tomorrow would be another day of feeling small and ordinary next to his amazing classmates. He did not know that very soon everything would change. He did not know that the next day would show the entire galaxy something incredible about humans that no one had ever imagined. The apex stalkers in their cages far below were restless that night. The guards noticed they were pacing back and forth more than usual. Their 6 eyes kept looking up toward the ceiling, as if they could sense something important was about to happen. But the guards thought nothing of it. After all, what could possibly go wrong in the most secure academy in the galaxy? The next morning started like any other day at Zenith Prime Academy. Jake ate his breakfast in the dining hall, watching the other students show off their special abilities. He did not notice the worried looks on the teachers' faces or the way they kept checking their communication devices. In the biocontainment lab deep underground, Dr. Vexani was preparing for a routine transport. One of the 3 apex stalkers was being moved to a research facility on another world. The creature had been drugged to keep it sleepy, but even unconscious, it looked terrifying in its transport cage. All systems check normal, reported Guard Captain Thorne. He was a big alien with 4 arms and thick purple skin. The transport ship is ready. We should have the creature loaded in 1 hour. Dr. Vexani nodded. She had done this many times before. The special transport cages were made of the strongest metal in the galaxy. They had energy shields that could stop a nuclear blast. Nothing could break out of them. But she did not know that the apex stalker was not really unconscious. The creature was very smart. It had been pretending to sleep for days, learning about the cage and the lab. It knew exactly when the guards would be busy with the transport. Jake was in his xenobiology class when the first alarm sounded. It was a soft beeping noise that made Professor Keltar stop talking and check her desk screen. "Please continue with your reading," she told the class. "There seems to be a small problem in the lower levels." The students went back to their books, but Jake noticed that the professor kept looking at her screen. Her compound eyes were moving very fast, which meant she was worried about something. 10 minutes later, a much louder alarm began screaming throughout the academy. Red lights flashed on the walls. The professor's face went pale. "Emergency lockdown protocol activated," said a voice from the speakers. "All students and staff must remain in their current locations. This is not a drill." Sarah's crystal skin turned white with fear. "What's happening?" she whispered. Professor Keltar was reading something on her screen that made her buzz with terror. "There has been a containment breach in the biolab," she said quietly. "Something has escaped." Marcus floated his books into a neat pile without thinking. "What kind of something?" The professor did not want to scare the children, but she knew they would find out soon anyway. "One of the apex stalkers has broken free." The classroom became very quiet. Everyone remembered yesterday's lesson about the galaxy's most dangerous predator. Several students started crying. The Zorkan children, who were usually brave, huddled together. Far below them, the apex stalker was free and very angry. The creature had been locked in a cage for 2 years. Now it was ready to hunt. Its 6 eyes glowed as it moved through the lab corridors. Guards tried to stop it with laser weapons and neural disruptors, but nothing worked. The creature moved faster than their eyes could follow. Its claws cut through armor like paper. Its mind could sense where each guard would move before they did it. One by one, the security teams fell silent on the radio. "This is Guard Captain Thorne," came a scared voice over the emergency channel. "The creature has reached level 7. We cannot stop it. Request immediate evacuation of all upper levels." Director Cronvell watched the security cameras from the command center. He was an old alien who had fought in many wars, but he had never seen anything like this. The stalker was not just killing randomly, it was hunting with a plan. "Sir, the creature is moving toward the main classroom building," reported his assistant. "There are over 300 students up there." "Seal all the doors," Cronville ordered. "Send every guard we have. We must stop this thing before it reaches the children." But the apex stalker was too smart and too fast. It had studied the Academy's layout during its time in captivity. It knew exactly where to go. The creature could smell the fear of young minds above. To a predator like this, frightened children were the easiest prey. In Jake's classroom, they could hear explosions and screaming from far below. The sounds were getting closer. Professor Keltar tried to keep the students calm, but her own fear was making her 6 arms shake. "The doors are locked and reinforced," she told them. "The security forces will stop the creature before it reaches us." But through the small window in their door, they could see security guards running past in panic. Some were injured. Others looked terrified. Whatever was hunting them was winning. The lights in the hallway began to flicker. Then they heard a new sound, a low growling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was the sound a nightmare would make if nightmares could talk. "It's on our floor," whispered Tony, the other human boy in the class. They pressed their faces to the window and saw something impossible. The air in the hallway seemed to shimmer and bend. Sometimes they could see the shape of something huge moving past. Other times there was nothing there at all. The apex stalker was using its camouflage ability, becoming invisible as it hunted. A security team came around the corner, weapons ready. They moved carefully, looking for their target. Suddenly, one of them was lifted into the air by invisible claws. His scream was cut short. His body hit the wall and fell still. The other guards fired their weapons at empty air. Bright laser blasts lit up the hallway, but they hit nothing. Then another guard disappeared, pulled into the shadows by something they could not see. The last guard ran toward Jake's classroom, pounding on the door. "Let me in, please!" Professor Keltar reached for the door controls, but it was too late. The guard was yanked backward into the darkness. His laser weapon clattered across the floor, sparking and broken. Now the hallway was quiet again. But they knew the creature was still there somewhere, invisible and waiting. They could feel its presence like a cold wind that made their skin crawl. Jake pressed his face to the window and saw something that made his heart race. For just a moment, the air shimmered near the broken laser weapon. 6 yellow eyes appeared, looking directly at him through the glass. Then they vanished again. The apex stalker had found them. It knew exactly where they were hiding. And now it was coming for them. The creature began to circle their classroom like a shark around a sinking ship. Sometimes they heard its claws scraping against the walls. Other times they saw those terrible yellow eyes appear and disappear in the shadows. Professor Keltar gathered the students in the corner farthest from the door. "Do not make any noise," she whispered. "Do not move. Maybe it will go away." But they all knew it would not go away. The galaxy's perfect predator had found its prey. Soon it would find a way inside, and then there would be nowhere left to run. The apex stalker moved like a ghost through the corridors of Zenith Prime Academy. It had reached the main classroom level, where hundreds of young students were hiding behind locked doors. The creature could smell their terror. It could hear their rapid heartbeats. Most importantly, it could sense their thoughts through its telepathic abilities. Every classroom door was made of reinforced steel that could stop a bomb blast. But the stalker's claws were sharper than any metal. It began testing each door, leaving long scratches in the steel as it searched for the easiest way inside. In classroom 7C, Jake Morrison sat with his 23 classmates. They were all pressed against the far wall, as far from the door as possible. Professor Keltar held her finger to her lips, reminding them to stay quiet. Her compound eyes were wide with fear. Outside in the hallway, they could hear the creature moving from door to door. Its claws made a horrible scraping sound against the metal. Sometimes it would stop and sniff, like a dog trying to catch a scent. Then it would move on to the next room. Zara was crying silently, her crystal skin flickering between blue and white. The colors were dim and scared. Marcus had lost control of his telekinetic powers. His books and pencils were floating randomly around the room, bumping into walls and falling to the floor. The 3 Zorkan students huddled together despite their natural armor. Their rock-like skin was usually gray, but now it had turned pale yellow with fear. Even beings who could bench press a car were terrified of the apex stalker. "Why is it taking so long?" whispered Lisa, the human girl. "Why doesn't it just pick a room and break in?" Professor Keltar knew the answer, but she did not want to scare the children more. The apex stalker was not just hunting randomly. It was being smart about this. The creature was testing each door to find the weakest one. It was listening to the sounds inside each room to count how many students were there. Most importantly, it was using its mind-reading ability to sense which group was the most frightened. Fear made prey easier to catch. Terrified victims made mistakes. They ran in panic instead of thinking clearly. The stalker was looking for the classroom full of students who were most likely to do something stupid. Jake watched his classmates falling apart with panic, and something strange happened in his mind. Instead of becoming more scared, he started feeling calmer. This had happened to him before when other kids picked on him at school. When everyone around him got excited and mean, Jake would become very quiet and peaceful inside. He looked around the room and noticed things that others had missed. Marcus's floating pencils were not moving randomly. They were moving in a pattern that followed the air currents in the room. Zara's flickering skin colors were not just from fear. They were also reacting to the electrical fields from the lights and computers. Most importantly, Jake was listening carefully to the sounds the apex stalker made as it moved through the hallway. The creature had a pattern to its hunting. It would approach each door from the left side first, then move to the right. It would scrape with its claws exactly 3 times, then pause to listen for 10 seconds. Jake had always been good at noticing patterns. His father said it was because Jake loved to watch animals. He could predict what a dog would do next by watching how it moved its ears and tail. He could tell if a cat was about to pounce by the way it wiggled its bottom. The apex stalker was an animal too, just a very big and dangerous one. And like all animals, it had behaviors that could be understood. Through the small security screen in the corner of the room, Jake watched the creature move between classrooms. The screen showed thermal images so he could see the stalker even when it was invisible. Its body heat showed up as a bright red shape against the cool blue background of the hallway. Jake saw something that made him sit up straighter. The creature was limping slightly on its back left leg. During its fight with the guards, something had hurt it. Not badly, but enough to change how it walked. This small injury was making the stalker more angry and desperate. Hurt animals were the most dangerous, but they were also the most predictable. Jake had learned this from watching nature shows on Earth. When an animal was in pain, it would try to end the hunt as quickly as possible. It would take more risks to catch its prey fast. The scraping sound was getting closer to their door. The apex stalker had checked most of the other classrooms and found them too difficult to break into quickly. Now it was coming to their room. Through the thermal screen, Jake watched the creature approach their door from the left side just like all the others. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Then 10 seconds of silence. But this time, instead of moving on, the creature began testing their door more seriously. Its claws dug deeper into the metal. The door was strong, but Jake could see small cracks beginning to form around the edges. "It's trying to get in here," whispered Professor Keltar. Everyone moved to the supply closet in the back corner. The students began crawling quietly toward the small closet. But Jake knew this was a mistake. He had been watching the thermal images of other classrooms. The stalker's mind-reading ability could sense when groups of people crowded together in small spaces. It made them easier to find. Jake also knew something else that the others had forgotten. In yesterday's lesson, Professor Keltar had said that apex stalkers were solitary hunters. They lived alone and trusted no one. They had never formed bonds with other species. But Jake remembered something from his nature books about earth wolves. Wolves were also fierce predators that most people feared. But sometimes, very rarely, a wolf could recognize a human who understood them. It had to do with body language and sounds and showing that you were not afraid. The door began to bend inward. Metal groaned and cracked. The reinforced steel was strong, but the apex stalker was stronger. In a few more minutes, it would break through. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Instead of crawling toward the closet with the others, he stood up and walked toward the front of the classroom. "Jake, no," whispered Professor Keltar. "Come back here!" But Jake had seen something in the creature's behavior that reminded him of a scared animal he had helped once back on Earth. A big dog had been hit by a car and was hurt and angry. Everyone was afraid to go near it because it was snapping and growling. But Jake had sat very still and made soft sounds until the dog understood that he wanted to help. Maybe, just maybe, the apex stalker was not so different from that dog. Maybe it was scared and angry and hurt. And maybe it just needed someone who was not afraid to understand it. The door gave one final groan and began to tear open. Through the gap, 6 glowing yellow eyes appeared, staring into the classroom with deadly intelligence. Jake took a deep breath and stepped closer to those terrible eyes. Behind him, his classmates watched in horror, certain they were about to see their human friend torn apart by the galaxy's most feared predator. The reinforced door finally gave way with a sound like breaking thunder. Metal pieces scattered across the classroom floor as the apex stalker squeezed through the opening. The creature was even more terrifying up close than in the pictures from yesterday's lesson. It stood 12 feet tall, its dark scales shifting color as it moved. The scales were not just for camouflage. They were like armor plating that could stop laser blasts. Its 6 eyes glowed bright yellow in the dim classroom light, scanning every corner for threats and prey. The creature's mouth opened slightly, showing rows of teeth like broken glass. A soft hissing sound came from its throat. Jake knew from the lesson that this meant the stalker was about to release its paralytic toxin. The poison would freeze everyone in the room so the creature could kill them slowly. Behind Jake, his classmates were pressed against the back wall in pure terror. Zara had gone completely white, her crystal skin no longer sparkling. Marcus was curled in a ball, his telekinetic powers completely out of control. Books and desks were flying around the room randomly. The Zorkan students were shaking so hard their armor plates were rattling. Professor Keltar spread her 6 arms wide, trying to shield her students. Her compound eyes were fixed on the stalker, and Jake could hear her buzzing with fear. She was ready to sacrifice herself to save the children, but they all knew she would not last more than a few seconds against this monster. The apex stalker took 1 step into the room, then another. Its claws clicked on the floor with each movement. The sound was like fingernails on a chalkboard, making everyone's teeth hurt. The creature's head moved back and forth as it studied its prey, deciding which one to kill first. But then something strange happened. The stalker's 6 eyes focused on Jake, who was standing much closer than the other students. Instead of immediately attacking the closest target, the creature paused, its head tilted to one side like a confused dog. Jake felt his heart beating very fast, but he forced himself to stay calm. He remembered what he had learned about scared animals. If you ran, they would chase you. If you screamed, they would attack. But if you stayed very still and showed no fear, sometimes they would stop and think. The young boy slowly raised his right hand, palm facing the creature. It was the same gesture he had used with the hurt dog back on Earth. It meant, "I am not here to fight you. I am not going to hurt you." The apex stalker's glowing eyes focused on Jake's hand. For a moment that felt like forever, human and predator stared at each other. The classroom was completely silent except for the quiet sobbing of frightened students. Then Jake did something that no Federation scientist had ever tried. He began making soft clicking sounds with his tongue. The sounds were not random. They were copying the pattern he had heard the creature make as it moved through the hallways. Click, click, pause, click, 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 pause, click. The stalker's head jerked back in surprise. Its 6 eyes widened. The hissing sound from its throat stopped completely. Jake continued making the clicking sounds, keeping the same rhythm and pattern he had observed. In the back of the classroom, Professor Keltar watched in amazement. Her compound eyes could see things that human eyes could not. She could see that the apex stalker's body language was changing. Its muscles were relaxing. Its claws were retracting slightly. Most incredibly, its throat sac was no longer glowing with poison. Jake kept clicking softly and took a small step forward. The stalker did not move to attack. Instead, it made a low rumbling sound that was completely different from its earlier hissing. Jake had heard this sound before, in documentaries about Earth's big cats. It was almost like purring. The creature lowered its massive head until it was closer to Jake's level. Its 6 eyes studied the human boy with what looked like curiosity instead of hunger. Very slowly, Jake extended his hand a little further, still making the soft clicking sounds. The apex stalker moved its head forward until its snout was only inches from Jake's palm. The boy could feel warm breath from the creature's nostrils. Up close, he could see that the stalker's scales were not just dark. They had tiny patterns that looked like fingerprints, making each creature unique. Behind Jake, his classmates held their breath. They were watching something that should have been impossible. The galaxy's most feared predator was behaving like a curious pet instead of a killing machine. Even more impossible, it seemed to be communicating with a human child using sounds that no Federation linguist had ever heard. Jake noticed something else that no one else had seen. There were old scars on the creature's snout and around its eyes. These were not battle scars from fighting other predators. They looked like marks from metal collars and restraints. This creature had been captured and caged for a very long time. The boy's heart filled with sadness as he understood what he was seeing. The apex stalker was not just a monster that killed for fun. It was a lonely, frightened animal that had been locked away from its home world for years. It had broken free not because it wanted to hunt children, but because it wanted to be free. Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. He moved his hand closer to the creature's snout, gently touching the dark scales. The stalker's eyes closed at the contact, and the purring sound grew louder. It was like touching a warm, living rock that vibrated with contentment. "Good," Jake whispered, using the same tone he used with scared animals on Earth. "It's okay. You're okay now." The apex stalker's massive body began to lower toward the ground. Slowly, carefully, the 12-foot predator laid down on the classroom floor like an enormous cat. Its 6 eyes remained fixed on Jake with an expression that could only be described as grateful. Professor Keltar's buzzing had completely stopped. She was staring at the scene before her with all 6 of her compound eyes. Her hive mind was processing what she was seeing, but it did not make sense according to everything she knew about xenobiology. Marcus had stopped crying and was staring with his mouth open. His telekinetic powers had calmed down, and his floating book settled gently to the floor. Zara's crystal skin was beginning to show faint colors again, though they were colors of amazement rather than fear. The Zorkan students were no longer shaking. Their armor had returned to its normal gray color. They watched in wonder as their smallest, weakest classmate did something that the Federation's strongest warriors could not do. Jake continued to pet the apex stalker's snout, making soft clicking sounds. The creature responded with gentle rumbles and purrs that filled the classroom with warmth instead of terror. For the first time in years, the galaxy's most feared predator was completely at peace. But outside in the hallway, emergency teams were gathering. They had weapons designed to kill the stalker, and they were preparing to burst into the classroom to save the students. They had no idea that inside a miracle was taking place that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. The emergency response team gathered outside classroom 7C with enough firepower to level a city block. Director Cronvel had called in military units from 3 different star systems. Heavy battle armor, plasma cannons, and neural disruptors were all pointed at the classroom door. "Sir, we have no life signs from inside," reported Captain Voss, a cybernetic warrior whose left arm had been replaced with a weapon system. The creature must have killed them all. Director Cronvel felt sick to his stomach. 24 young students and their teacher, all dead because of a containment failure. He would have to explain to 24 sets of parents why their children were never coming home. "Prepare to breach," he ordered. "Kill the stalker on sight. Maybe we can recover the bodies for proper burial." But as the assault team prepared their weapons, a sound came from inside the classroom that made everyone freeze. It was not screaming or the roar of a hunting predator. It was something none of them had ever heard before. A deep rhythmic purring that seemed to vibrate through the walls. "What is that noise?" whispered Captain Voss. Before anyone could answer, the classroom door opened from the inside. Professor Keltar appeared in the doorway, her compound eyes wide with amazement. Behind her, all 23 students were very much alive and completely unhurt. "Please do not shoot," the professor said quickly. "Something incredible has happened in here." Director Cronvel pushed past his soldiers to see inside the classroom. What he saw made him question everything he thought he knew about the universe. Jake Morrison, an 8-year-old human boy, was sitting cross-legged on the floor next to the apex stalker. The galaxy's most feared predator was lying down like a giant house cat, its massive head resting near Jake's lap. The creature's 6 eyes were half closed with contentment as the boy gently scratched behind what might have been its ears. "By the 7 moons," breathed Director Cronvel. "How is this possible?" Jake looked up and smiled. "He was just scared and lonely," the boy said simply. "He didn't want to hurt anyone. He just wanted someone to understand him." The stalker made a soft clicking sound and Jake clicked back in the same pattern. The creature's purring grew louder, and its tail, which had been rigidly straight with tension, began to move back and forth in what could only be described as wagging. Captain Voss kept his weapons trained on the stalker, but he was completely confused. "Sir, this makes no sense. Apex stalkers cannot form bonds with other species. It's genetically impossible." "Apparently not," said Professor Keltar. Her scientific mind was racing with the implications. Jake approached the creature without fear. He made sounds that seemed to calm it down. Within minutes, it became completely docile. More soldiers and scientists crowded into the doorway to witness the impossible scene. News of what was happening spread through the Academy's communication system like wildfire. Within an hour, reports were being transmitted to every major world in the Federation. Dr. Vexani, the xenobiologist who had been studying the stalkers, arrived with a team of researchers. She had expected to find a crime scene. Instead, she found Jake teaching the creature simple games with his fingers. "The neurological scans are incredible," she reported after setting up her equipment. "The stalker's stress hormones have dropped to nearly zero. Its brain patterns show curiosity and contentment instead of aggression. Most remarkably, it seems to be learning human language patterns." Jake's father, Captain Ryan Morrison, arrived on the emergency transport from the embassy. He was prepared for the worst news of his life. Instead, he found his son becoming the center of galactic attention. "Dad," Jake called out happily. "Look what I found." His name is Rex. The apex stalker, now apparently named Rex, lifted its massive head and looked at Ryan with those 6 glowing eyes. Instead of attack posture, the creature tilted its head in what seemed like polite curiosity. "Jake," his father said carefully, "I need you to very slowly move away from that thing." "He's not a thing. Dad, he's my friend." Jake continued petting Rex's snout. He was trapped in a cage for a long time. He just wanted to go home. Over the next several hours, teams of scientists ran every test they could think of. Rex allowed them to examine him as long as Jake stayed nearby. If the boy moved too far away, the creature would become agitated until Jake came back. The implications were staggering. If humans could bond with apex stalkers, what other untamable creatures might respond to human contact? Military strategists began discussing the possibilities. Scientists demanded to study Jake and other human children. Philosophers debated what this meant about humanity's place in the galactic order. But the most important changes were happening in the classroom where it all began. Jake's fellow students looked at him with new respect and wonder. He was no longer the weak human child who could not glow or float things or bend metal. He was the boy who had tamed the untamable. "How did you know what to do?" asked Zara, her crystal skin flickering with curiosity. Jake thought about it for a moment. "I watch a lot of animal shows back on Earth. My dad says I have always been good with animals. But I think Rex just needed someone to not be afraid of him." Marcus floated a small ball over to Rex, who caught it gently in one massive claw and rolled it back. "He's actually kind of playful," the vegan boy observed. Even the Zorkan students, who had been too proud to talk to humans before, came over to see Rex up close. The stalker allowed them to touch his scales, purring contentedly as long as Jake stayed nearby. As word spread throughout the galaxy, humanity's status began to change. They were no longer seen as primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. Instead, they became known as the species with an incredible gift, the ability to understand and connect with other life forms in ways that even the most advanced civilizations could not achieve. Research stations across the galaxy began requesting human visitors to help with dangerous creature studies. Diplomatic missions started including humans as cultural ambassadors to newly discovered species. The Galactic Federation created a new department called Interspecies Relations and put humans in charge of it. But for Jake, the most important change was much simpler. When he returned to classes the next week, he was no longer eating lunch alone. Students from dozens of different worlds wanted to sit with the human boy who could talk to monsters. Rex was moved to a special habitat designed to feel like his homeworld of Kethmore. Jake visited every day after school, and the two friends would play games and practice their clicking language. The stalker thrived in ways that amazed the researchers. Other humans began arriving at the academy to study this new discovery. They found that while not every human could bond with apex stalkers, many had natural abilities with different dangerous species. It seemed that humanity's long evolution alongside Earth's diverse animal kingdom had given them something unique in the galaxy. Years later, When Jake had grown up and become the Federation's first director of interspecies communication, he would often think back to that terrifying day in the classroom. He had learned that sometimes the scariest things in the universe just needed someone brave enough to reach out and say, "I understand you." And in his private moments, when the weight of galactic diplomacy felt too heavy, Jake would visit Rex in his habitat. The massive predator, now old and gray but still gentle with his first human friend, would purr contentedly as Jake scratched behind his ears and told him about his day. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from an 8-year-old boy. Sometimes the greatest strength is not in weapons or technology, but in the simple courage to offer friendship to those who need it most.